My parents excluded me from the trip that I paid for to take my sister's husband, but when I decided to cancel everything, nobody expected it. I don't know how to start this without sounding completely out of place. Honestly, I'm still trying to process it all, but writing has always helped me, and I think I need to get this out of my system. I'll probably sound ridiculous or even cruel to some, but I accept that. This happened a few weeks ago, and I'm still dealing with the consequences. I'm a 28-year-old woman, and since graduating from college, I've been working very hard on my career. I'm not a millionaire or anything like that, but I have a good job that allows me to save and give myself a few treats. My family isn't as lucky. My parents are retired, and although they have a modest pension, it's not enough for big luxuries. My younger sister, 25, is married to a man I'll call Luis. They both live paycheck to paycheck because Luis has never had a stable job, and my sister works part-time since they want to have children soon. My relationship with them has always been complicated. My parents really like Luis because, according to them, he's a kind and family-oriented man. I think he's a complete slacker who takes advantage of my sister, but I don't usually say anything because I always end up being the bitter one in the family. A few months ago, after a major promotion at work, I decided to do something special for my family. I planned a 2-week Caribbean cruise as a gift. I wanted us to have an unforgettable experience together. The trip was all-inclusive. Luxury cabins, excursions, meals, everything. It was something we had never done before, and although it cost me a good chunk of my savings, I thought it was worth it. From the beginning, I made it clear that this was my gift to them. I organized everything, paid for the cabins, selected the dates when everyone could go, and even called each one to make sure their documents were in order. I was excited about the idea of sharing something so incredible with them, but everything changed a week before departure. I received a call from my mother while I was at work. I thought it would be to talk about the final details of the trip, but instead she started with a strange tone, as if she were trying to soften something. "We need to talk about the cruise, honey," she said. I felt a knot in my stomach immediately, but I tried to stay calm. "What's up?" "Well, your sister and Luis are very excited, but it turns out there weren't enough cabins available for everyone. There's only room for 4 people. So we decided that the best thing would be for Luis to take your place. You understand, right? You're so generous and you've been on trips before. We thought it would be a very nice gesture on your part to let them go." I was silent. I literally couldn't process what I was hearing. I had planned this trip for months, paid every penny out of my own pocket, and now they were telling me there simply wasn't room for me. "Wait, are you telling me I can't go on the trip I paid for?" I finally asked. "Well, technically you can, but it would be selfish if you didn't let Luis go. He's never had an experience like this, and you know you always have more opportunities. Besides, we thought you could enjoy something quieter at home. You could use that time to relax and recharge." It was like I was in a parallel dimension. I couldn't believe how casually my mother was excluding me from something I had organized. I tried to maintain my composure, but my voice came out colder than I expected. "And who exactly decided this?" "Your father, your sister, and I discussed it, and we thought it was best for the family. We know you always put others first, and that's why we thought you'd agree." That's when I realized they hadn't even considered my opinion. They simply assumed I would give up my place because, as always, family is everything, right? I hung up without saying another word. I was furious, hurt, and completely incredulous. During the following days, they tried to call me several times, but I didn't answer. My sister even sent me messages thanking me for being so mature and understanding how important this was for Luis. That's what broke me. It wasn't a sincere thank you. It was more like a mockery, as if they were really convinced that my life revolved around them. That's when I started planning what I would do, and let me tell you something, if they thought they could take advantage of my good nature, they were very wrong. Update 1. After that surreal call with my mother, I spent the next few days completely paralyzed between anger and sadness. Part of me wanted to yell at them everything I was feeling, but another part told me that it wouldn't do any good. Deep down, I knew that to them, I was nothing more than the family's reliable resource, the daughter who was always there to solve problems, the older sister who could sacrifice herself without complaint. The time had come to show them that it wasn't always going to be that way. At first, I thought about simply canceling the trip immediately, but something stopped me. I wanted to understand exactly how they had arrived at this democratic decision to exclude me from something I had paid for. So I started connecting the dots and looking for clues. The first red flag came when I checked the family WhatsApp group. It had been pretty inactive during the days leading up to the call, but reviewing the history, I noticed something strange. 2 weeks before my mother called me, the group had become mysteriously silent. Before that, everyone was excitedly talking about the details of the trip, what to pack, which excursions to choose, and even how they wanted to decorate the cabins with family photos. Suddenly, that activity stopped completely. That's when I realized there was an alternative group that I wasn't a part of. It wasn't hard to confirm. My sister, probably carelessly, mentioned in one of her individual messages something like, "Didn't you see that in the group? Oh wait, never mind, Mom will tell you." It was obvious there was a separate group where they discussed things they didn't want me to know. I decided to play along a little. I responded very politely to her message, something like, "No, I haven't seen anything. What are you planning?" Her reaction was immediate. She changed the subject and said goodbye hurriedly as if she was afraid to say anything else. This confirmed that something was happening behind my back. The last straw came when a friend of my sister's, who had worked with her in the past, and with whom I have a cordial relationship, sent me a message on Instagram. It was completely unexpected, but what she told me left me speechless. Basically, she asked me, "Is it true that you're not going on the cruise because you gave your place to Luis? Your sister is saying it was your idea, and that you wanted to give them that space because they don't have as many opportunities as you." My blood was boiling. How was it possible that they were distorting the story so much? According to this friend, my sister was selling the narrative that I, being the altruistic and generous sister I had always been, had voluntarily given up my place because I wanted Luis to experience something special. She was receiving praise and comments like, "How amazing your sister is," or, "I wish I had a family that close." It was as if they were using my supposed sacrifice to feed their egos and portray themselves as the noble victims who simply accepted my generosity. That night I couldn't sleep. I knew I couldn't keep ignoring what was happening. It was obvious this hadn't been a spontaneous decision or something that came up by chance. There was something much more calculated behind all of this, and I was determined to find out what it was. So I started to investigate a little further. Since I was the one who organized the cruise, I had direct access to the travel agency's online account and all the booking details. Reviewing the dates and payments, I noticed something curious. The original booking included an extra double cabin. That cabin had been canceled just a week after I made the initial payment, which reduced the total to only 4 cabins. It was clear that someone had intervened to change the plans from the beginning. When I called the agency to confirm, they told me that the change request had been made by my mother. According to them, she argued that it wasn't necessary to spend on an extra cabin because one person was considering not attending. They were planning my exclusion from the very beginning. And then everything clicked. From the start, my mother, my sister, and Luis had decided that this wasn't my trip. They had seen the perfect opportunity to use my generosity as a ticket for their own dream vacation. Worst of all, they weren't just excluding me. They were making me look like the one responsible for this decision to avoid any blame. At this point, I was no longer hurt, I was furious. But if I learned anything in this whole process, it's that revenge shouldn't be impulsive. So I decided to play along a little longer. I wasn't going to confront them yet, not until I had everything perfectly planned. Update 2. When I discovered everything they had done behind my back, I knew I couldn't let them get away with it. Not after all the manipulation, lies, and audacity of excluding me from something I had financed myself. I wasn't going to yell at them or confront them directly. They expected drama. They expected me to act like the difficult daughter they can always label as exaggerated. But I wouldn't give them that satisfaction. So I devised a plan, a silent but effective one. The first thing I did was review the contract and the terms of the cruise booking. I wanted to be absolutely sure that I had full control over the decisions. Fortunately, as the person who had paid for everything and made the reservation, I had full authority to manage any changes. The terms stipulated that I could cancel the trip up to 48 hours before departure. And although there would be a penalty, the refund would be significant. In addition, I could decide exactly how and where to transfer the remaining funds. It was perfect. I knew I couldn't cancel everything immediately. I had to wait for the right moment to maximize the impact. Meanwhile, I pretended I knew nothing. I responded to some messages from my mother and sister with short and generic answers, just enough for them to believe that I was still accepting their decision. In their minds, I should be at home, depressed and resigned to my fate. But what they didn't know was that every second that passed only gave me more time to perfect my revenge. The day before the cruise departure, my mother called me once again. I thought she might want to make sure everything was under control or worse, gloat a little more in her supposed victory. But what she said made me even more convinced that I was doing the right thing. I wanted to thank you, honey, for being so understanding about all this. We know it wasn't easy for you, but it's a reminder of how generous and mature you are. When we get back, we promise to do something special with you. Maybe a dinner at home. A dinner at home? That was their grand plan to compensate after literally stealing a luxury vacation from me. It was at that moment that my decision solidified. That night, just before the deadline to cancel, I called the cruise agency. My heart was beating fast as I spoke to the representative, but my resolve was unwavering. Hello, I need to cancel a complete booking. The number is redacted. The agent asked me to confirm my details, and then explained that there would be a penalty for the cancellation. He gave me the exact amount that would be refunded, and although it was less than what I had originally paid, I didn't care. It wasn't the money I was really after. It was the principle. Perfect, proceed with the cancellation and transfer the refund to the bank account I will provide. The representative asked me if I was sure because it was a large reservation. I confirmed. Yes, I'm sure. A few hours later, I received an email confirming the cancellation and the transfer of the refund. It was done. The cruise, their dream vacation, had vanished into thin air. I didn't tell anyone, not even my closest friends. I wanted to see their reactions firsthand. The next day, I casually checked my sister's Instagram. She had posted a photo of her and Luis at the airport with the caption, "Ready for paradise. Thank you, my name, for being the best sister in the world." I didn't respond. I imagined the scene when they arrived at the port, my family happily carrying their luggage, ready to board the cruise, only to be greeted by confused employees who would inform them that their trip had been canceled. Later that afternoon, the phone started ringing non-stop. My mother, my sister, even Luis called me repeatedly. I ignored all the calls. Finally, my mother left a voicemail that sounded on the verge of collapse. "What did you do? They told us the reservation was canceled. We were all here ready to board. And now they tell us there's nothing. Why did you do this? Call me immediately." The rage in her voice was evident, but I was calm. I waited a few hours before responding to let the chaos really settle in. When I finally answered, I did so with the greatest calm possible. "What happened?" I asked as if I knew nothing. "You know perfectly well what happened. You canceled the cruise. How could you do this to us? We were all here with our luggage, and now we're stranded." I took a breath and replied without a hint of remorse. "Yes, I canceled it. After all, why should I pay for a vacation where I'm not welcome? If Luis needed my place so much, I thought the most logical thing was that he wouldn't need my money either." There was a deathly silence on the other end of the line before my mother started yelling. She accused me of being selfish, immature, of ruining the family experience. My sister took the phone at some point and started crying, saying that I had humiliated the whole family, and that she would never forgive me. But the best part was when I heard Luis's voice in the background, complaining that someone should pay him for the days of work he lost. I almost laughed out loud. Days of work? That man didn't even have a stable job. I hung up before they could continue. I didn't owe them any explanations or apologies. They had already made it clear how little they valued my effort, my time, and my money. Now they were just facing the consequences of their own greed and manipulation. That night, I poured myself a glass of wine, sat on my sofa, and enjoyed the silence. I knew this was only the beginning of the drama, but I didn't care. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was in control and I wasn't willing to give it up. Update 3. I wasn't prepared for the level of chaos my decision would unleash. Although I should have anticipated it, the cancellation of the cruise didn't just leave my family stranded at the port. It also generated an avalanche of calls, messages, and of course the public drama they love so much. That night, after hanging up on my mother, my phone kept vibrating for hours. My sister alternated between sending me crying audio messages and text messages in which she insulted me without restraint. Luis also tried to contact me, but I obviously ignored him. The real show began the next day when details of the disaster started to leak out among the rest of the extended family and close acquaintances. I don't know exactly who started telling the story, but it wasn't long before I started receiving messages from other relatives, most of them trying to understand my side of the situation. Your mom is very upset. She told me it was a misunderstanding. Why didn't you talk to them before canceling? Your sister is saying you acted out of jealousy because she has a relationship and you don't. Is that true? We understand you're hurt, but don't you think this was a little extreme? After all, it's your family. It was clear that my sister and mother were controlling the narrative as they always did. According to them, I had canceled the cruise on a childish whim because I couldn't stand sharing. There was also a version circulating that it had all been a misunderstanding, and that I had misinterpreted their intentions. What infuriated me wasn't just that they were lying blatantly, but that once again they were trying to paint me as the villain. I decided not to respond to any of those messages. There was no point in trying to defend myself to people who had already chosen a side. But not everyone believed their version of the story. There were a couple of cousins and an uncle with whom I've always had a close relationship who wrote to me directly to ask what had happened. I told them everything in detail, how they had changed the reservation to exclude me, how they had lied to me saying there was no room for me, and how my sister was using my supposed sacrifice to look like a heroine. I also explained that the decision to cancel wasn't impulsive, but a direct response to their manipulation. My cousins were outraged. One of them, in particular, told me something that really helped me feel validated. I knew something wasn't right. Your sister has always been manipulative, but this is another level. You did well to defend yourself. They just see you as an ATM. That phrase, although harsh, gave me the clarity I needed. For years, I had allowed my family to take advantage of me because I felt obligated to do so. I had believed that my value within the family dynamic depended on what I could provide them, whether it was money, time, or personal sacrifices. This was the first step in breaking that cycle. Meanwhile, my mother and sister weren't giving up. Apparently, after they were stranded at the port, they had to return home with their bags packed and humiliation written all over their faces. My sister tried to do some damage control by posting an old family photo on social media with a caption that said something like, "Sometimes things don't go as planned, but family is always everything." The irony almost made me spit out the coffee I was drinking when I saw it. Family is always everything, of course, as long as that means using me as a means to get what they want. The real blow came a few days later when my mother called me again, this time trying to sound reasonable. "Listen, all this drama has passed. We want you to come to dinner this weekend to talk things over. It's not good that we're fighting. We're family." There was that word again. Family. They always brought it up when they wanted me to ignore what they had done. "I don't think that's a good idea, Mom," I replied calmly. "You made decisions without consulting me and expected me to accept everything without question. I don't see anything to talk about." "But enough of this childish behavior," she suddenly shouted. "You ruined our vacation and made us look like fools in front of everyone. Don't you think that's enough?" "Enough for whom?" "Because I'd say enough was what you did by planning to exclude me and then lying about it." I didn't wait for her answer. I hung up before she could continue with her speech. That weekend, as expected, I became the main topic of conversation at the family dinner. My cousins sent me messages telling me that my mother and sister spent the whole night complaining about me, painting me as someone selfish and ungrateful. But what really surprised me was that several people started questioning them directly. Apparently, my uncle, the same one who knew the truth, had decided to put them in their place. "If you were so bothered by what happened, why didn't you use your own money to pay for another cruise? Or why didn't you ask Luis to pay his share? Why did everything have to fall on her?" According to what they told me, my mother was speechless, and my sister tried to deflect the subject by saying that it wasn't that simple, but the damage was already done. Other relatives started murmuring amongst themselves, wondering if it was really fair what they had tried to do to me. That was the first time I felt like things were changing in my favor. It wasn't just me defending myself anymore. Others were starting to see my family as they really were. Update 4. A week after the disaster at the port, My mother tried a different approach. She called me with a much more conciliatory tone, almost as if she were really trying to fix things. "I've been thinking a lot, honey," she began. "Maybe we handled things wrong. It wasn't our intention to make you feel excluded. We really feel that all of this got out of control." For a moment I was almost convinced. Her tone was so different from usual that I wondered if she really understood the damage they had caused me. But then she continued, "Why don't you come home this weekend? We can make a special meal. We talked to your sister and Luis, and everyone agrees that we should put this behind us. Besides, we have something we want to propose to you." That last sentence set off all my alarm bells. It wasn't a sincere invitation. It was another attempt at manipulation. The way she said, "We have something we want to propose to you," made it clear that once again they expected something from me. "What kind of proposal?" I asked directly, letting my tone reflect my skepticism. "Oh, nothing complicated. We just want to see if we can rearrange a trip for everyone. It would be a way to fix things, don't you think? We could split the expenses this time, but we would need your help with the planning since you're so good with those things." There it was. They wanted me to organize another trip, possibly even pay for most of it, but this time with the illusion that it would be a family effort. "I don't think that's a good idea, Mom," I replied firmly. "I already tried to organize something for everyone, and look how it turned out. I'm not interested in repeating the experience." My mother sighed, visibly frustrated. "You're acting so resentful, you know? I don't understand why you can't just put this behind us. We all make mistakes." "The problem isn't the mistake," I replied. "It's that you did it on purpose without any respect for me, and then you tried to justify it with lies. I'm not going to put myself in the same position again." Her tone immediately changed. "Well, if you continue with that attitude, I don't know what else we can do. We just wanted to fix things. If you prefer to remain separated from your family, that will be your decision." I hung up without saying more. I wasn't going to allow her to manipulate me emotionally again. What hurt me most wasn't their attempt to convince me, but the total lack of genuine remorse. It wasn't an apology. It was a strategic move to get me to be their source of resources and organization again. After that call, I realized something important. It wasn't just about the cruise or the money. It was about how my family saw me, how they assumed my role was always to be the one who fixed everything, the one who sacrificed her well-being for others. That dynamic was deeply rooted and wasn't going to change with a meal or a fake apology. Final update. It's been 3 months since I last wrote here, and I must admit that many things have changed. After weeks of tension, accusations, and ignored calls, I finally achieved what seemed impossible: fixing things with my family. It all started with a meeting at my mother's house. It was my sister's idea. She called me and said she was tired of the distance. I was surprised at how genuine she sounded, so I agreed to go, albeit with little expectation. During the meeting, everyone did their part. My mother apologized for not handling things correctly, and my sister admitted that she had been selfish in taking my place on the cruise. Even Luis, my brother-in-law, apologized for his part in the whole mess, although he barely looked me in the eyes while he was talking. At that moment, I decided to let it go. Not because I really felt they had changed, but because I needed peace. It was a tacit agreement. I wouldn't talk about the cruise anymore, and they wouldn't try to use me in the same way again. So, little by little, things returned to a kind of normalcy. However, what I never expected was what happened next. It all started innocently. Luis and I would occasionally cross paths at family gatherings, and although we had never had a particularly close relationship, I began to notice a change in his behavior. He was kinder to me, more attentive. If he ever seemed uncomfortable with me, that disappeared. In fact, he started looking for opportunities to talk to me, whether about trivial matters or more personal things. In one of those conversations, while we were in my mother's kitchen during a family meal, he confessed that the cruise incident had opened his eyes about many things. He said he had realized how controlling my sister could be, and how that made him feel trapped. "Sometimes I feel like I'm just an accessory to her," he told me with a sincerity that took me by surprise. I didn't know what to answer. I felt uncomfortable, but also flattered that he trusted me to share something so personal. From that moment on, our conversations became more frequent and, although I didn't want to admit it at the time, more intense. Everything changed a month ago. Luis showed up at my door one night visibly nervous. He said he needed to talk to me, that he couldn't keep what he felt to himself any longer. Before I could stop him, he confessed that he had developed feelings for me. It was a surreal moment. I knew it was wrong. I knew this crossed all the lines, but I couldn't help but feel attracted to him. There was something in the way he looked at me, something I had never felt before. That night changed everything. We kissed, and although at first I tried to stop it, I ended up giving in. Since then, we've been seeing each other secretly. We meet when we know my sister is busy, or when he can make up an excuse to go out. I know it's wrong. I know this is a betrayal on many levels, but there's something about our connection that feels so inevitable. Luis says he can't continue with my sister, that he's considering leaving her, but we both know it's not that simple. There are too many things at stake. Their marriage, our family, the chaos this would unleash if anyone found out. Sometimes when we're together, I try to imagine what it would be like if everything were different, if we didn't have to hide. But reality always hits me. For now, we continue as we are, trapped in this strange limbo. I don't know how much longer we can keep it a secret, but I also don't know if I want to stop it. All of this is a mess, I know, but I can't help it. If anything relevant happens, maybe I'll come back here to update, but for now, I think this story ends here.